Hello everyone, Phreak here, and patch 9.22 is here. Rise of the Elements, the big Set 2 update, and there is a lot going on, but in some ways not a lot of specifics, so this might be a fairly short video. We'll see where the mood strikes us. Alright, so, bam, huge patch, big deal here. Ranked is going to be off for 2 weeks, give people some time to learn. And then ranked begins again on 9/23, so that's going to be a thing. And let's talk about what's going on. All right, we've got new elemental hexes, there's champions, there's origins, there's classes. There's a doc about things they learned and whatnot, but let's start going through this first, then we'll go, through that maybe a little bit later. All right, so we made a few systemic changes in preparation for the thing. The board size change will give multiple options, decisions to make the optimal formation. Made the changes account for the champion synergies in new set. Okay, so the board size is taller. Instead of having 3 rows on your side, you have 4 rows on your side. That is a very big deal. Very, very meaningful. That's going to do a whole lot. It's subtle, but really meaningful. Just the fact that you just have more room to position, that you can have a front line, mid line, and back line, and be on them or create more space. You have room to like fit tanks behind rangers to like tank assassins while still like keeping your rangers fairly safe. Also want to point out that something that's pretty big as well is there's a lot less just big circle AoE spells in the game. So there's no Sejuani and no Cho'Gath ults anymore. So you can also clump more and be punished less for it. There's still AoE, don't get me wrong. Lux ult's basically Aurelion Soul ult and things like that, but you don't get screwed quite as hard for being in a group, which is, I think, kind of nice. There's still stuff like Aatrox and whatnot, but overall, there's a lot more room to spread out. You can be much more branched out. There's no Hex Tech origins, so you can keep your items together and whatnot. There's a lot that's changing around. Additionally, player versus player damage is down in the first stage, the same in the second, and up in the third PvP stage, which means that across 1 through 3, like, they're the same. Technically, I think it's 2, 3, and 4, because I think only PvE is stage 1, but whatever. But then, from there onwards, it's a little bit higher. So, late game has slightly more damage overall, early game slightly less damage overall, so you can, like, further open fort. Big thing here is that some units themselves don't deal any damage. So using the set 1 example of Elise, it wouldn't be Elise and her spiderlings damaging you, but it does say that if at least one summon is alive, if the champion was dead, it's like the champion was alive. So if Elise, we're going to use her again, had summons and spiderlings but dies, you would just get Elise's damage as long as one spiderling was alive. So I like that consistency. I like that, randomly playing summons doesn't just kill people faster. There's still some degree of that, and you might still have like a Zyra plant or a Malzahar Voidling alive, and you get full damage in that way. So there's still some degree of extra damage there, but it's not as absurd as the other version. So I think that's nice. Level 8 champions drop a little bit more often at tier 4, a little bit less tier 5. Otherwise, no changes there. So, okay, I think it's 2, 6, 12 is the 5 drop chance at level 7, 8, 9. So, okay, there's your odds. Good to know. Little Legends no longer collide once you pick your champion from the carousel. I think that's a positive change for the game as well. So, yeah, all these things overall I think are sort of positives, like game design positives for the game. That should do cool things. Because so many other things are changing in this patch, it's not really worth like reading into like what will it mean for the metagame, because the like actual origins and traits are going to do more than that. But these are cool things. So all right, sweet. Next up, new season, new rules. Yeah, ranked is off. You don't lose LP for 4th. You don't gain LP for 5th. Slightly reshuffling the number of challengers and grandmasters. So 300 in Korea, Vietnam, and China. Each shard in China, I'm pretty sure. 200 in EUS and NA, and then all the others, only 50 challengers, 100 GM. So that's just good overall for the health of having good labels. Okay, fine, that's by itself. On we go, doesn't affect the actual gameplay. This is a very, very big change, and I am very positive on this, okay? So to reiterate, the way the game works is, let's say you have a champion like Warwick. There are only 39 copies of Warwick in TFT. if they're on your bench or in your shop or on your field, that is 1 to 9 if you have a gold version. 1 to 9 copies of the Warwick, which means if you have a gold Warwick, there's only 30 Warwicks left that other people can draft. And so when they get cards on their side and on their shop, and this card is a 1-drop, well, there's 30 copies of Warwick, but 39 copies of Vayne. So odds are they see Vayne and not Warwick. But the odds are only slight, right? 39 to 30 is not a huge ratio. That's changing to 29. So when someone has a gold Warwick, there are only 20 copies of Warwick to 29 copies of Vayne. That's more skewed odds. Now we're basically, 3 to 2 here instead of 4 to 3, which is a pretty meaningful difference. It's 30% instead of 25% more, or 33%. But so this starts to really matter, right? So yeah, hey, here we are. I guess yeah. So what this means for the actual game is that you cannot easily just follow along and be a meta sheep. I think TFT is best when the skill it really tests of you is your ability to adapt. Your ability to see what you're given and what everyone else has and say, actually, I need to start going this comp. And knowing which 1-star units to keep and which 2-star units to sell because you don't go that comp anymore and you'd rather have these units in or this synergy going or whatever. That's your really key skill. Now, this is something you could kind of shortcut if you forced an off-meta strategy. You're like, well, I'm just going to go Sork Rangers every game, but it was actually a reasonable comp, and if no one goes Sorks and no one goes Rangers, look, you get your comp and everything's fine, and I know it's a bad comp, but bear with me, right? I don't know, it's Varus with a hat. I don't know what to tell you. But ultimately, that creates some positives here, where you cannot just be the 3rd Void Assassin player. You cannot just be the 4th Jinx Brawlers player because there just aren't enough copies of those champions anymore. And so there's 10 less 1-drops, 4 less 2-drops, 2 less 3-drops, 1 less 4-drop. And some of these odds get lower and lower and lower, right? The difference between 13 and 12 Akalis is pretty small overall. But when you have a Silver Akali, and you have a Silver Akali, well, there would have been 7 left, but now there's 6 left. It's like, well, that's 14% less Akalis out there. My chance at seeing Akali is 14% lower from just this change. That's meaningful, right? That certainly matters. And what it also does mean, by the way, is that if you are playing essentially off meta, or if you're playing a unique strategy within your lobby, within your game, you also now have higher chances of seeing your stuff. If you're the only Rangers player and no one else is playing Rangers, right? And there's 12 different 2-drops in the game. Instead of there being 300 something copies, this is 312-ish. There's only 240, which means that when someone has, a bunch of copies of Shen and someone else has a bunch of copies of Kennen and someone else has a bunch of copies of Akali, and you're like, aha, well, that means all the Varuses and Ashes and Kindreds are available to me, right? Because a larger percentage of the overall pool has gone away, right? Instead of, 8 of 300 cards is gone, it's 8 of 200 cards is gone. Which, when you consider that every person has 7 different copies of 2-drops and 3-drops, it's okay, well, that's 49 cards gone from the pool. 49 of 300 is less meaningful than 49 of 200, right? And that's what we're getting down to. That's what we're really going for here is they're getting rid of more of the chaff, so you're seeing more of the wheat. And that's really cool. So I'm big on that. That's cool stuff. The pool size going down makes it worse to follow and also better to innovate. So we spent a lot of time on a very simple concept. You probably skipped through a lot of it. It's time to move on. Another small thing, mana generation has been somewhat unrandomized and flattened. 1-star champs gain 8 mana, 2-star is the same, 3-stars now get 12. So one of the big things about this set is 3-starring is more valuable. It's I will say more important. I think it is more important, but it's also just stronger. And because it's stronger, it's more important. So not only is mana generation obviously increased at 3-star, which is great, but also you're kind of relying on this more because mana generation from taking damage has been reduced. So the only way to get more mana than you had last time was actually being in 3-star. That's pretty meaningful. That's very relevant. You really, really care about that. That is something to really be concerned over, that if you really need to cast some spells, not only is your spell stronger, but you're going to cast it more often, right? Before it was just, we'll just get to 2-star and you're fine. Now it's, no, get 3-star. Excuse me. One other thing to point out that's not in these patch notes here, but I'm pretty sure is true based on PBE, is 4 and 5 cost champions have non-linear spell scaling. So the way TFT works for every champ up until right now is that if your ability did 100 damage at level 1 and 250 at level 2, it did exactly 400 at level 3. It was 100 plus 150 plus 150. Or, 20, 40, 60, right? 20, 70, 120. It was always linear. They say, okay, well, you went from 1 to 2. That's a big bump, but 2 to 3 is going to be the same bump. Now, base stat scaling was always plus 80%, then double. So it was like slightly more important to go to 3. And, mana generation, right? Scaling as well, which is nice. But, that was fine because the ability itself scaled, it was okay. Right? Health and damage went plus 80%, plus 100% of what it was at 2. This was just like, well, it's now 1, 2, 3, or, 1, 3, 5, or 1, 4, 7. 4 drops and 5 drops, I know I'm over-explaining, will have non-linear scaling. So Ashe in set 2 is a 4-drop. She is an epic unit. She's purple. The attack speed she gains on her spell is going to be something like 50%, 100%, 250%, instead of like 50, 100, 150, which would have been the norm. Now, keep in mind, right, there are only 10 copies of 5 drops in the game. So you must find copy number 8 and 9 with only 1 left in the pool anywhere. Similarly, when you go for a tier 4, you have to find copy number 8 and 9. There's only 3 left out in the world. I have personally made a single level 3 Akali, and it lost me the game because 2 level 2 Akalis was better than a single level 3 Akali, and also the wrong items were taken over. But I did it for the memes. I was already in second place. I was okay losing. It was because I was streaming. But it was wrong to go for 3-star there. What's nice is there's less tanks overall whose job is just crowd control. And so, hey, chasing down a 3-star is awesome. Chasing down 3-star Olaf. Like, if everyone thinks Berserkers are bad and you're the one Berserker player, well, when you go grab your Olaf and no one else is grabbing Olaf, but that person's taking Ashe and that person's taking Yorick and that person's taking Annie, well, with the lower pool size, you're gonna see Olaf more often. Now, unless they are taking those champs at the same rate you're taking Olaf, you will eventually see less Olafs than before, right? That's the core crux of the pool change, is that this only buffs you getting a 3-star if you're grabbing champions at the same rate other people are grabbing every other champion across the board. If everyone's done grabbing 1-drops and you're still chasing a Warwick, your chances are going down. So that's the other thing I want to point out, by the way, when you're going to play around this, and this is worth getting back to, I think, is that when everyone has passed your tier by, or if you're the only one on that tier, right, if no one sees any 5-drops yet, and you've grabbed, your first version of Lux, and you want to grab your second Lux and your third Lux, okay, well, Lux is not fair because it's the same, but we'll go with Olaf, who's a 4-drop here. If no one's taking any 4-drops yet, your odds at finding your 2-drop or your 2-star do go down. Once they're all taking in equal portions, then it kind of comes back to you. So that's one thing that's worth pointing out, which means power leveling to find high-cost units is going to make it harder to 2-star them. FYI. One thing that is nice, though, as we close out on this topic, is because people are going to be more likely to chase the 3-star version because of them basically being the I win button. For example, 3-star Lux ult does like 500, 700, 9,000. Like, it actually one-shots people if you get 3-star Lux. Someone will have a 3-star Lux at some point, and it'll be hilarious. But that means only one person ever took any copy of Lux. odds of that are slim. Let's move on finally for real. Okay, I'm excited about this set of changes here. Recipe changes, item changes, let's go. All right, Cursed Blade is gone. I know a lot of players rejoice. I think this was one of definitely the whacker items in the game where it wasn't all that satisfying to use. It felt really bad to be on the receiving end. I don't think it was really OP. It was just a feels bad. And in my opinion, game design should be optimizing for feels goods over power. If this wasn't powerful and felt bad, that's bad design. If it's not powerful or that powerful, but feels great, cool. Feeling good is more important than being powerful, but it felt bad and wasn't all that good in my opinion. Next up though, it means that we can use that recipe for Hurricane, which I am super happy about because I love Hurricane as an item. I think it's super duper cool. I'm a big fan. And it builds out of offensive stats finally, which it really needed to do because before it was Spatula MR and that was whack. So, hooray! Good to see that. There'll be more math later on. This is a buff. Next up, we have, of course, the Spatula remake. So, Become Inferno is the new Sorcerer. Become Mage is the new Demon. Become Warden is the new Knight. Become... the old Hurricane becomes Light. Light is essentially Nobles, it feels like, in this. And Become Yordle has become Berserker. As far as recipes are concerned, right? Like, those traits are going away, these ones coming in. So I want to point out, Blade Master still exists. Glacial still exists, right? Those didn't go anywhere. As well as, all the other sort of standard sparring gloves items. But that's most from there. And which is cool stuff. So... this is going to be fun because Mage is chance to cast spells twice. And it's just, here's some mana. So it's like, hey, no, really go cast some spells some more. Which is pretty exciting. This is like my kind of like most looked at one as this is going to be interesting. And getting Mage 3 or Mage 6 should be fun. Stat changes. Nerf to Spatulas. You no longer get double stats for the item. So you no longer get, a bunch of armor for a Knight's Vow / Warden's Mail in this case. You just get the Chain Vest. The Spatula itself simply provides, well, this unit is now a Warden. It simply provides this unit is now a Mage. This unit is now Inferno. This unit is now Light. This unit is now a Berserker. Now, what's nice about all of these updates, and the same is true for Blade Master as well, and the same is true for Glacial as well, all of those stat changes, how do I word this? All of those incremental changes matter. So let's take, for example, a look at Yuumi from set 1, right? Champion becomes a sorcerer. Now, there was the innate. If you were a sorcerer, you get double mana auto attacks. That was nice. But if you didn't get up to Sorc 6, there was no stat gain, right? If you're already Sorc 3 and you went to Sorc 4 or Sorc 5, nothing changed. Your champion gained no power whatsoever. Nothing, because the Sorc buff was already global. Think about Knights. If you went from Knight 2 to Knight 3 or from Knight 4 to Knight 5, nothing changed. The Knight buff was already global. You didn't get anything out of it. So there's some value in at least getting double armor because what else is it going to do? In this case, though, these things all have benefits for the wearer, right? Inferno spells burn. Not your team spells burn. When you have Inferno, Inferno users spells burn. So if you're wielding some AP, you can give it a Spatula, and now it's burning. Yes, you need to have Inferno 3 for the stat to turn on, but every one of these things is selfish. Every single one is selfish. If you're Berserker, you have a chance at splash damage. If you're Light, you gain health and attack when another Light champion dies. 2 other Light champions, right? Wardens get bonus armor. Mages recast their spells. Inferno champions burn. So this is really good. I like this a lot, right? Blade Masters have the double hit, but only on Blade Masters. Glacial units stun, but only if they're Glacial. So I like this a lot. Like, I like that there's less sort of global buffs. I think it's actually cooler if it's the units themselves. They're kind of a little bit more self-contained. I think that's like a cool, interesting sort of design direction for most of these sort of sets overall. But it does mean that you don't really need the double stats because, well, you have a chance to double strike. That's what the Spatula gives you. And in some cases, it means everyone else double strikes more often because it gave you 3 or 6. In this case, it's 2 or 4 or 6. So yeah, I think it's really cool. Now, I am also glad for a lot of these changes. Chain Vest and Negatron Cloak give 5 more armor/MR. Mathematically, this is the right choice. This makes them line up more appropriately with Giant's Belt as far as like overall durability is concerned. They were generally just very weak on a stat profile level, so that's a good thing. Death Cap with 75% more ability power. Now, mathematically, last minute of the math, and this is still true, Death Cap was better than Jeweled Gauntlet. As overall math's concerned, right? If you're playing, a random mage, like let's call it Old Aurelian Soul or Lux or whatever, as long as you didn't really care about the auto attack crits, because you generally didn't, Death Cap was just more DPS on your spells than Jeweled Gauntlet. Like, yeah, they could crit for 1.5x, but like the math worked out to say it doesn't matter. Death Cap is just better. Right, it's more AP overall, just as a base item, and then the multiplier on AP was also simply better than everything else. Now, what I will say, though, is I think it's good that they buffed Death Cap, simply because Sork buff is gone. There is no global, 45 or 100 whatever ability power anymore on the squad, so yeah, maybe it's pretty useful. Now, one other thing that I saw, and I'm pretty sure it's not going to work this way, but theoretically, one thing I noticed is they slightly retooled the stat panel on your champions. So now instead of showing 0 AP, 20, 40, 60, whatever, it shows percent spell damage. So every champion shows 100% when they come off the bench. And then you give them a nuclear large rod, and it shows 120%. They do 120% spell damage. Now, I am assuming that 140 does not get multiplied by 75. The 40 gets multiplied by 75%, but not the 100 sort of base spell damage that people have. I'm assuming not. If it does, this is the best item in the game by far. And it's just absurd, and this is like the entire metagame. I'm pretty confident that's not what's happening here. But just because I saw the tooltip, there's like that small piece of me that's like, but what if? Anyway, next up, we have Dragon's Claw. I saw some confusion in the Reddit thread about this, so I'm going to clear it up here. The Dragon's Claw magic damage reduction is not the same as the magic resist. So Dragon's Claw, right, is still double MR, so it gives 50 magic resist. So your MR goes from 20 to 70, which means you take about 30% less damage. You then take another multiplicative 50% less damage. So the nerf is slightly softened just because the Negatron Cloak gives more armor, but overall Dragon's Claw is half as good as before. Because instead of taking 1/4 damage, you take 2/4 damage. It literally does half the effect it used to. Now, it still gives more magic resist by 10 total, which doesn't make up for it, but that is a substantial nerf to Dragon's Claw. Of course, the Dragon Origin itself is also gone, so there's a really substantial drop in actual magic damage durability. One thing to point out, just mathematically, is that 50% damage reduction is identical to double plus 100 MR. So this is essentially still worth 170 magic resist. This combined cost is worth 7 Negatron Cloaks. That's still one of the most efficient things you could possibly get, as long as you assume that Negatron Cloak was a well-statted item, which, maybe not. But I don't know many other items that are worth 7 more of the base component, right? If this is worth 140 ability power, then it's as good as Dragon's Claw. So if you have 200 base AP, if you have 160 ability power and then build a Death Cap, this is as gold efficient as Dragon's Claw. That's not going to happen, right? Let's be clear about that. But also keep in mind that probably means that Negatron Cloak is not properly statted, which is fine, but worth noting, right? All right, Giant Slayer getting converted from 5% max health to 8% current health. Fair enough. I want to point out that there is a synergy with one of the traits called Predator. Predators instantly kill anything that they damage if it's below 1/4 HP. Giant Slayer helps to get them to 1/4 HP, so that seems like a positive there. Also really want to point out that with Hurricane having a better build path, Hurricane Giant Slayer seems more usable, and that seems like a cool thing. Small Guardian Angel nerf, sure thing. Small Hand of Justice buff, cool thing. Ionic Spark nerf, Luden's Echo nerf, but Luden's Echo will now always go off once per spellcast. I believe this is referring to the old internal cooldown on Luden's Echo. You would see things like Akali and Lucian who sometimes couldn't get their second spell to proc Ludens, but also I assume this also means that there were cases where a champion could cast this ult for a very long time, maybe like Misfortune, and get multiple Ludens off. So I'm not sure which of the halves of that was. I didn't really remember what was going on, but that's still a good change. We talked about Negatron change already. Recurve Bow nerf is a correct thing to do, because keep in mind this is 15% more auto attack damage and 15% more spell damage. Recurve Bow was definitively too good, for sure. So proper change there. Runet's Hurricane bonus damage going from 75 to 60%. Now, I said to do math. Here's the math. Hurricane is still an overall higher DPS item than before. Because you gain 15% attack speed out of the build, that more than makes up for the bolts being less powerful. Because you still get full-on hit damage for things like Giant Slayer. And you get to gain mana because there's a recurve bow on it, the best item in the game. This is overall a buff. We should be seeing more Hurricanes. We're going to be seeing more of this kind of build. Now, I do want to point out that Hurricane no longer is multiplicative. You don't go from, normally 1 target to 2 targets with a Hurricane, to 4 targets with 2 Hurricanes, to 8 targets with 2 Hurricanes. You don't get a bolt per bolt. You just get +1 bolt per Hurricane. So if we see a 3 Hurricane champion, it's 45 attack speed, hitting 4 targets, which is still pretty good. But you probably won't see a 3 Hurricane build. You might see 1 or 2. But again, I really want to point out, Hurricane times 1 is objectively stronger than before. The only downside is instead of getting 40 MR, you get 25, but who cares? Thieves' Gloves, slightly stronger at level 8 and 9. Cool, my favorite item. I love Thieves' Gloves. In there. Item systems, changing drops a little bit. Slightly less gold from some, slightly less spatulas. Getting combined items happens a little bit less. Dragons now drop orbs mid-combat, and so does Elder Dragon Rift Herald. I think that's awesome. I like this a lot, because nothing feels worse than going into your final fight, and you're like, so I got a Blade Master buff for my Sort comp. I mean, attack speed's kind of cool, I guess. And now you get to see a bit more stuff, right? You get more items thrown onto you. I really, really love late game item decisions as the change. Like, I talked earlier about adaptability with comp mattering, but adaptability with items I think is also super cool. So glad to see things happening. That's awesome. Champs that contribute to a trait will have their portraits and tier info displayed inside the tooltip. So you go over to the left-hand side of your screen and you hover light or dark or ranger or whatever, and it tells you all the rangers in the game, all the light units in the game. That is awesome. The ones that you already have played will be highlighted. Awesome. Some skins for the boards. These look pretty sweet. That's going to be awesome. Some bug fixes. Their tooltips are now good. 3-star tier 3s were doing more than intended. Whoops. It's time for the TLDR. The Rise of the Elements is coming. It's going to be hype. I'm really excited about this one. Let's talk about it. Board size is taller, and also there's way less anti-clump mechanics, things like Cho'Gath and Sejuani, and even Misfortune to a certain degree. Those are gone, so you have a lot of freedom to clump if you want to spread out if you want to, but big changes there. Player damage down in the early game, up in the late game. Summoned units don't deal damage by themselves. They only represent the summoner might be still alive. Slightly higher 4-drop, slightly lower 5-drop chances at level 8. And Little Legends no longer collide with your opponent. So cool stuff there. All, I would say, relatively minor. Like, I don't think this is like really game warping, but cool to see. Rank works a little bit better. That's nice. Huge change here is the pool sizes. Mathematically, what this means is if you are following someone else's comp, you're going to have a much harder time putting it together. The game is like really, really telling you, please don't copy each other. Go do your own stuff. Please don't be a meta sheep. That's a huge buff to players with brains. And the other thing I want to point out is if you are going your own way and you're trying to, finish your 3-star Warwick or your 3-star Ashe or your 3-star Kindred or whatever else, the way this math works out is when you're trying to find copy number 6 and 7 and 8 and 9, it is easier for you if the other players around the board have been grabbing units at the same rate. grabbing other 2-drops at the same rate, right? There's 12 2-drops in the game. And if you own 6 Varuses, and there aren't 6 copies of every other 2-drop taken out, right? If you have depressed the Varus inventory more than everyone else has depressed the other champion inventories in equal measure, your odds of getting your 3-star are going down. Because you've taken the first 6 Varuses, instead of 20 being left, there's only 16 left. This hurts you overall. Like getting 3 stars is generally going to be a bit harder because not everyone chases 3 stars, and as you pull and pull and pull, your odds get worse and worse and worse. But getting 2 stars is generally going to be easier, and most comps are built from 2-star champions. Really for the most part, comps are built out of 2-star champions. And so what this means is, if you realize that everyone's taking every champion except the Blade Masters, it will be fairly easy to get a bunch of 2-star Blade Masters and get your entire Blade Master comp online, get them all to 2-star with no problem. And look, if you're lucky, you'll get to 3-star, which was already the case here. But it means that you can pivot into untaken comps much more easily. You're going to be shown untaken comps much more often, because if there's 300 2-drops out there, and 12 of them are Aatrox, you're going to see it so often. When there's 200 2-drops out there and 12 of them are Aatrox, you're going to see it a lot more often. And that's kind of how that math works out. So, branching out is going to be easier. Diversifying is going to be easier. Getting away from what other people are doing is going to be better. That's going to be a really big change. I think it's a huge, huge buff to like the game being better. 1-star champs getting, the mana averaged, which is cool. 3-star champs actually gaining more mana, and mana gained from taking damage is going down. This is actually a pretty big deal overall, and is going to make, even though it's going to be harder to 3-star, there's more value in getting 3-star. One other change to point out is that 4 and 5 drops are going to have non-linear spell scaling. For example, Lux does 500, 800, 9,000 damage at 3-star. So even though it's harder, right, because there's less out there and you're trying to grab that last one when there's 1/3 as many or 2/3 as many left over, you're rewarded really heavily to chase for it, right? People are going to be hungry for that 3-star 4-drop, that 3-star Annie, that 3-star Olaf, that 3-star, whatever else, Yorick, etc. That's going to be a really big deal. Overall recipe changes, basically all the new spatula items coming in for all the new traits. That's cool stuff. Overall damage changes here doesn't mean a whole lot. The thing I'm going to point out is that Hurricane is overall buffed because it has a recurve bow. And the other thing to care about is Giant Slayer going to physical damage. Dragon's Claw getting nerfed very heavily. This item is basically half as good as it used to be. That's a really big deal. Fairly minor changes to most of the late game. Cool UI update that'll let you kind of see in-game what the remaining champions are. That's a cool thing overall. Skins are coming out. And overall, Set 2 looks sweet. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be exciting. See you in 2 weeks when Rank comes in. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.